triangle over here. Boop, 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 boop. It's just a little baby triangle. Because it says that the coordinates have vertices, or the coordinates of the vertices of triangle ABC are A, -3, -1, B, -1, 7, and C is 9. We're just going to draw a little triangle, just a little baby one, and we're going to put A, B, and C because I think visually it helps you understand that you are working with a triangle. We are comparing the sides. So to compare the side lengths, you have to figure out the length of the sides using the distance formula. So it doesn't matter which one we start with. Let's start with side AB, just because A is first in the alphabet and it goes in order. So A's coordinate is -3, -1. B's coordinate, or I should put A, I guess. And then B's coordinate is -1, 7. So your distance formula is on your blue laminated sheet on your test, hopefully. It's also on the wall. It is probably not going to be written in the problem, but it is on your formula sheet. So you're finding the length. So the distance formula is, I'll put it up here. You don't have to write it if you don't want to. x2 minus x1 to the power of 2. And then you're doing the same thing with the y's. I'm subtracting y2 minus y1 to the power of 2. So that's my distance formula. And I am going to plug in my values. My x's get subtracted, my y's get subtracted. The only thing you need to be careful with is your double negatives. If you're subtracting a negative, it becomes a plus sign. So I have my square root. In the first set of the parentheses, I'm taking the second x and I'm minusing the first x. It doesn't really matter which one's first and which one's second. As long as it's the x values and they're subtracting, you're going to get the same answer. So I'm going to take the second x, which is -1. I am minusing -3. So if I'm subtracting a negative, what am I actually doing? Adding. So I'm going to do -1 plus 3. So the 3 is not negative anymore. It becomes a plus sign. Then I'm going to bring down my plus sign because that's in the formula. Bring down my parentheses because that's in the formula. And then in parentheses, I'm going to do y2 minus y1. Y2 is 7. And I'm subtracting -1. Because I'm subtracting a negative, same thing, it's going to become a plus sign. So it's 7 plus 1. And then I'm going to combine steps here instead of writing out literally every single step. So if in parentheses I have -1 plus 3, -1 plus 3 is 2. If I take 2 and I raise it to the power of 2, what am I bringing down? 4. Bring down my plus sign. I have 7 plus 1. That's nice. That's 8. What is 8 to the power of 2? 64. And then I'm going to combine them, add them together to make 68. So if I take my calculator and I take the square root of 68, there's a calculator somewhere. You remember you have to use that shift button. What is that? So you have to use the shift and then this x squared button. So 8.2-ish. So 8.2. So this side is 8.2. Now we have to figure out the next side. So it doesn't matter which side we do. I'm just going to go in order. I did A to B. I guess now I'll do B to C. So if I'm looking at B to C, I'm using coordinate point B. I'm using coordinate point C. I will just write it out so it's nice and in front of my face. B's coordinate is -1, 7. C's coordinate is 2, 1. And do the same thing. I'm going to take my x's, subtract them, take my y's, subtract them. Just watch for your double negatives. And even if you don't know about the double negatives, your calculator will do it for you. So I'm going to take 2 and I'm minusing -1. Since it's minus negative, it makes plus. So 2 plus 1. And then I'm going to take y2 and I'm subtracting y1. So I have 1. I'm minusing 7, bless you, to the power of 2. And then I'm going to combine my steps. 2 plus 1 is 3. What is 3 squared? 9. 1 minus 7 is -6. If I take -6 and I square it, positive 36. It will always bring down a positive number at this point because -6 times -6 is going to make positive. 6 times 6 will also make a positive. So no matter what this point, you should be bringing down a positive number. 9 plus 36 is 45. So if I square root it, what do I get? Around 6.7. So from B to C, it's 6.7. So right now I have 2 sides out of the 3 sides. They're not the same. So it's either going to end up being a scalene triangle where they're all different, or an isosceles triangle where 2 of the sides end up being the same. If they're all different, it's going to be a scalene triangle. So we do have to find the last side, which is what a lot of people were not doing on the homework yesterday. You have to find the third side. So I'm going to use A and C. Okay. So I'm going to find that last side, which is AC. So I'm going to take my x's, subtract them, take my y, subtract them. And this is why you only have 2 problems of this, because I know it's obnoxious and annoying. That's why we're doing one of them together. So if I take my x's and I subtract them, I'm going to do 2 and I'm minusing -3. Since I'm minusing a negative, it's really going to be a +3. And I'm going to take my y's, subtract them. So I have 1, I'm minusing -1. 1 minus -1 is really 1 plus 1. Two plus 3 is 5. 5 to the power of 2 is what? 25. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So this is 29. So you could automatically stop here technically, because you have the square root of 68, you have the square root of 45, and you have the square root of 29. Those are clearly all not the same. If you really want to find a decimal, what's the decimal for this? 5.3. So if all of them are different, is it equilateral, scalene, or isosceles? Scalene. Scalene means all different sides. Isosceles has 2 congruent sides. Equilateral is equal, so that would make sense. So that's exactly how number 2 is. It's time consuming, it's annoying, I know that. That's how it's going to be on your midterm. It's honestly not that hard of a problem. It's just very time consuming. It's annoying. It's tedious. But the good thing is we don't really need, like, the midterm is curved, so is your EOC. So like if it's a problem that you can actually do, take your time. The next one we're going to jump to 6, 7, and 8. We're going to do those ones together. And then I'll tell you which ones you can skip. So jump over to 6. 6 through 9 has 2 triangles. They're 2 congruent triangles. Remember yesterday we talked about if it has a little line and a little line, that means those pieces are congruent. If it has, for angles, if it has an arc mark, if it has a little angle mark, that means that those angles are congruent. So it says use the figure for 6 through 9. I actually took off number 9, so you don't have to do number 9. And then it says triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. So if you look at the way they write this, we talked about this in the beginning of the year, the way that they write these statements is the way that they're showing certain pieces are congruent to each other. So notice that the first letter is A and the first letter over here is D. And then if you look at your picture, A and D, A is over here and D is over here. They both have 1 arc mark. So there's 1 arc mark here, 1 arc mark here. Those are congruent to each other. If you look at the middle letter, B, and you look at the middle letter over here, E, B and E should be congruent to each other. So B has 2 arc marks and E has 2 arc marks. Those are congruent to each other. The last one is C. C is right here. The last one is F. That's right there. If you look at C and F are also congruent to each other. They didn't put a little arc mark there. If you want, you can add your 3 arc marks. But you don't really need to. You can assume that that third measure is congruent to each other, because if this one's congruent and this one's congruent, there's only one angle left. So these ones would have to be congruent to each other. Okay, so let's talk about number 6. We have to find the measure of angle A. So A is 2x plus 20. I know it's congruent to angle D, which is 3x plus 10. What could I do with these 2 angles if I know they're congruent to each other to solve for x? Equal them to each other. Because they're congruent to each other, they're equal to each other. So I'm going to take 2x plus 20 and I'm going to set it equal to 3x plus 10 because they are congruent pieces. So I'm going to say 2x plus 20 equals 3x plus 10. And then there's 4 different ways to solve this equation. Does anybody have a preference on what we want to move? The 20? Okay, so let's move the 20. If you want to move the 10, you can move the 10. That's not wrong. Either way is correct. So I'm going to move the 20. The 20 says plus 20. So I'm going to subtract it. Numbers have to go with numbers. So when I minus 20 to one side, it has to move to the 10 to the other side. And then what is 10 minus 20? Negative 10. And then this is where people get stuck, because they want to take 2 and 3 and add it to make 5, but you can't do that. There's an equal sign between them. So what do I have to subtract to both sides? 3x. 3x is positive, so I'm going to minus it. Because they're on opposite sides of the equal sign, you have to use opposite operations. 2x minus 3x is negative 1x, which equals to negative 10. And then what's my last step? Ooh, divide, yeah. So divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. So what does x equal? 10. So they want to know the measure of A. A is 2x plus 20. So what do I have to do with 10? Plug it in. So we're going to substitute it back in. I know A is technically 2x plus 20. So I'm going to substitute in my x value. So I'm going to do 2 times 10 plus 20. Because once you find x, they're going to want you to plug it in sometimes. So 2 times 10 is 20. What is 20 plus 20? 40. So that is 40. Put that in your picture. Add that to your little angles, because it'll help me the next one. So 40 can go here. And then I could also put 40 on the other picture because they're congruent. So I know 40 is here as well. Okay, so now we got to find B. So if I look at B, B is right here. I don't have a number. 80, because B and E are congruent. It's just 80. So if this is 80, this is also 80. So I can put 80 over here. And then the last one I need to find is EFD. EFD is really angle F. Angle F is congruent to angle C, but there's no numbers there. So what could I do to try to figure out that third angle inside of a triangle? From what? Yes. So since the triangle adds to make 180, you can take 80 and 40 away from 180. And then that's going to give you the answer. Some people are going to try to write like an equation for it. So this is really adding to make 180. So you could do 80 plus 40 plus, I don't know, we'll say X, we'll call it X, equals 180, because the insides need to add to make 180. You don't really need to write an equation for it. You could just subtract your numbers. You get the same answer. So 80 plus 40 is 120. 120 plus something needs to make 180. So 60. So if you can do that without writing an equation, I am totally fine with that. Use your brains. has to add to make 180 because it's a triangle. So the answer has to be 60.